The manila envelope trembled in my hands as I sat in the law office's waiting room. My father's will, the last words he'd ever say to me, wrapped in legal jargon and witnessed signatures. I smoothed my blazer, a nervous habit from years of corporate presentations, but today I wasn't Vivian Ramirez, marketing director. Today I was just a daughter saying a final goodbye to a father who never quite understood me. Ms. Ramirez, Nestor, Dad's longtime friend and lawyer, appeared in the doorway. We're ready for you. I followed him into the conference room, where my brother Max sat with his perfect posture and perfectly pressed suit. His wife Reagan perched beside him, manicured hands folded neatly on the polished table. Viv, Max nodded curtly. 4 years my senior and eternally disappointed in my life choices. Aunt Laura squeezed my hand as I took my seat. Her presence was unexpected but welcome. She'd always been the family's voice of reason. Let's begin. Nestor cleared his throat, unfolding the documents. Being of sound mind and body, Taylor Ramirez hereby. The words blurred together until one sentence cut through like a knife. I leave my entire estate to my son, Maximilian James Ramirez. The room went silent. I felt my chest tighten. Nothing for Vivian? Aunt Laura's voice cracked the tension. Max's lips curled into a smirk. Well, Dad always said family comes first. Some of us understood that better than others. Max, Reagan whispered, but he continued. If you'd chosen differently, focused on building a family instead of chasing promotions, that's enough, Nestor interrupted, but a letter slipped from the will packet, floating to the floor. My name was written on it in Dad's familiar scrawl. What's that? Max demanded. Nestor picked it up, examining it. It's addressed to Vivian only. Everything was supposed to come to me. Max stood, his chair scraping against the floor. That letter belongs with the estate. Actually, Nestor's voice was firm. Personal correspondence isn't part of the estate. This belongs to Vivienne. I clutched the letter, my father's last words to me, as Max's face reddened. Aunt Laura's hand found my shoulder. Sometimes, she said quietly, what seems perfect on the surface isn't quite what it appears. I met Max's gaze across the table. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Fear? But then it was gone, replaced by that familiar condescension. Enjoy your letter, Viv, he said, gathering his things. I'll be busy managing our father's legacy. As they left, Aunt Laura stayed behind. Read it carefully, dear, she said. Your father wasn't always good at saying things directly, but he saw more than people realized. I stared at the envelope, my name in fading ink, wondering what final message my father had left me and why it needed to be secret. I waited until I was alone in my apartment to open Dad's letter. My hands shook as I broke the seal, half expecting another disappointment. Instead, I found 3 pages of his distinctive handwriting. My dearest Vivian, it began, by now you know about the will. You're angry, you have every right to be, but there's something you need to understand. All is not as it appears with your brother. Watch closely. The truth has a way of surfacing when we least expect it. The doorbell interrupted my reading. Eloise, my best friend, stood there with wine and takeout. Thought you might need this, she said, pushing past me. How bad was it? Max got everything. I poured us both generous glasses. But Dad left me this letter. What's it say? It's weird. He's basically telling me to keep an eye on Max. My phone buzzed. Reagan inviting me to dinner tomorrow. Families should stick together, her text read. Are you going? Eloise asked, reading over my shoulder. I probably should. Keep your enemies closer, right? The next evening, I found myself at Max's mansion, watching his picture-perfect family performance. Eva, my 15-year-old niece, pushed her food around her plate while Reagan detailed their recent vacation. The Maldives were just gorgeous, Reagan gushed. Though Max had to take that emergency business call. Which one? Eva muttered. Max's fork clattered against his plate. Eva. The one from Daria? Eva's eyes met mine. Dad's special friend? The silence was deafening. Reagan's smile froze. Eva, go to your room. Max's voice was deadly quiet. Who's Daria? Reagan asked. Nobody, Max snapped. Eva's being dramatic. Eva stood, chair scraping. I saw them at Cafe Luna last week. She was crying, Dad, and you were holding her hand. That's enough. Max slammed his hand on the table. Wine glasses rattled. Eva fled upstairs. Reagan excused herself, face pale. I started to stand, but Max grabbed my arm. Don't get any ideas, Viv, he hissed. This is none of your business. I yanked free. Dad's letter suggested otherwise. His face changed. What exactly did he write? Enough to make me wonder what else you're hiding, brother dear. Upstairs, I found Ava in her room, tears streaming. I'm sorry, Aunt Viv. I couldn't keep quiet anymore. He's always with her, and Mom doesn't know. It's okay, I hugged her. Sometimes the truth needs to come out. Walking home later, Dad's words echoed in my mind. The truth was indeed surfacing, and it was uglier than I'd imagined. I pulled out my phone and Googled Cafe Luna. Time to do some investigating of my own. Cafe Luna turned out to be a cozy spot in the quiet part of town. I sat at a corner table, laptop open, pretending to work while I watched the entrance. 3 days of staking out the place during lunch hours, and finally, my patience paid off. Max walked in, checking his phone nervously. A woman followed minutes later. Tall, elegant, probably early 30s. They sat in a secluded booth, heads close together. I snapped a few discreet photos with my phone, then nearly dropped it when Aunt Laura appeared beside me. Quite a show, isn't it? She said, sliding into the seat across from me. You knew. She stirred her coffee. Your father knew too. That's Daria. She works at Max's firm. I watched them through the reflection in the window. Does Reagan have any idea? That's not even the worst part, Laura sighed. Check his company credit card statements. Your father had access as a board member. That's how he found out. Later that night, I called Nestor. I need copies of the company financial records, I said. The ones Dad had access to. Vivian? He hesitated. Your father left those documents in a separate envelope. I wasn't supposed to give them to you unless you asked specifically. The manila envelope arrived by courier the next morning. Inside, I found credit card statements, hotel receipts, and restaurant bills, all showing a pattern. But one receipt made my blood run cold, a payment to a private medical clinic. My phone rang. It was Eva. Aunt Viv? Her voice was shaky. I overheard Dad on the phone. Daria's pregnant. I closed my eyes. How do you know? She was crying about telling her parents. Dad kept saying he'd handle it. A pause. Are you going to tell Mom? Ava, this isn't your burden to carry. But it's killing me. Mom thinks everything's fine, but Dad's destroying our family. I heard Max's voice in the background. Ava quickly hung up. My phone buzzed with a text from Eloise. Turn on the news now. The local business channel was running a story about Max's firm, something about financial irregularities. The camera panned to show him leaving the building, Daria close behind. Another text, this time from Aunt Laura. Your father's funeral is tomorrow. Daria's been invited by Max himself. Apparently, he's planning to come clean before someone else does. I looked at the stack of evidence on my desk, the receipts, the photos, the clinic payment. Max had no idea I knew everything. Tomorrow would be interesting. Sometimes, Dad's letter had said, the truth needs a little help coming to light. I picked up my phone and dialed Reagan's number. It was time for a sister-in-law chat. The funeral home buzzed with hushed conversations. I stood near Dad's casket, accepting condolences, when Reagan rushed up to me, her face ashen. "Tell me you're lying," she whispered, "about Daria, about the clinic." "I have the receipts," I said quietly. "Dad kept everything." "Mrs. Ramirez?" A young woman approached us, Daria. She wore a black dress that didn't quite hide her emerging baby bump. "I'm so sorry for your loss." Reagan's fingers dug into my arm. "You must be Daria from the office. Max mentions you often." The tension crackled. Daria's eyes darted between us. "Speaking of Max," Reagan's voice was razor sharp. "Where is my husband?" I I should go," Daria stammered, retreating toward the exit. Eva appeared beside me. "Dad's in the parking lot, having a meltdown on his phone." "Ladies and gentlemen," Nestor's voice cut through the murmurs. "If you'll all take your seats, we'll begin the service." I sat between Ava and Aunt Laura, watching Max slip in late, his tie askew. Reagan's chair remained conspicuously empty. "Where's Mom?" Eva whispered. The answer came moments later as Reagan stormed in, clutching her phone. "You bastard!" she screamed at Max. "You used our joint account for her apartment?" The mourners gasped. Max jumped up. "Reagan, please, not here." "When, then? After the baby comes?" Her voice echoed off the funeral home walls. "How long have you been lying to me?" "I can explain everything," Max pleaded, reaching for her arm. "Don't touch me." Reagan shoved him away. "I trusted you while you were building a whole secret life." Aunt Laura stood up. "Perhaps we should give the family some privacy." "Privacy?" Reagan laughed bitterly. "Like the privacy of that clinic appointment last month?" "Tell them, Max. Tell everyone what that was for." Max's face went white. "How did you—" "Vivian showed me everything. Your father knew, didn't he? That's why he left you the money, to keep your mess quiet." I felt Ava trembling beside me. "I want to leave," she whispered. "Go with Aunt Laura," I told her. "I'll handle this." But before I could move, Daria appeared in the doorway again, tears streaming down her face. "Max, please, I can't do this anymore." The room fell silent. Max stood frozen between his wife and his pregnant mistress, his perfect facade crumbling. "Dad would be so proud," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Such a perfect family man." Max turned to me, his eyes blazing. "You did this. You planned this." "No, brother dear, you did this all by yourself." The whispers grew louder as Reagan grabbed Ava's hand and walked out, leaving Max alone in a room full of witnesses to his humiliation. Sometimes karma needs an audience. The aftermath of Dad's funeral exploded across social media. Max's perfect life unraveled in real time as Reagan posted their separation announcement. I watched it all from my office until Eloise burst in. "Have you seen the news?" She thrust her phone at me. "Max's firm is launching an internal investigation." Before I could respond, my office door slammed open. Max stood there, disheveled and reeking of whiskey. "Happy now?" he snarled. "You've destroyed everything." "I think you managed that yourself," I replied, nodding to Eloise. She slipped out, already dialing security. "Dad's money was supposed to fix this." He paced like a caged animal. "Pay off Daria, keep everything quiet." "But you couldn't let it go, could you?" "Fix what exactly? The pregnancy? The embezzlement?" His laugh was hollow. "You don't know anything." "I know about the clinic payment." "Was that for a paternity test, Max? Is the baby even yours?" He lunged forward, grabbing my desk. "Shut up." "Mr. Ramirez." Security appeared in the doorway. "You need to leave." "This isn't over," he spat. My phone buzzed, Reagan calling. I answered on speaker. Daria's at my house, she said without preamble. She's telling me everything. The other women, the missing money, all of it. God, Vivian, how did I not see it? Max froze, face draining of color. Other women? I echoed. 3 others, Daria's voice came through. He promised each of us the same things, but I'm the only one stupid enough to keep the baby. Security moved toward Max, but he backed away, hands raised. You're all lying, he said, but his voice cracked. Daria, baby, we talked about this. Don't baby me, Daria shouted through the phone. I found the burner phone, Max, saw the messages to Jessica, to Amanda, to... Enough, Max roared, kicking my office chair. It crashed into the wall. Security grabbed him. As they dragged him out, he kept screaming, You're just jealous. Dad knew you'd end up alone. That's why he left me everything. My phone buzzed again. Nestor. Vivian? There's something you should know. Your father's will. There was a condition. If Max was found guilty of any criminal activity within 6 months of the inheritance, everything would revert to you. I sat down hard. What? The investigation at his firm. They found irregularities, major ones. Your father knew, Vivian. He set this up. Through my office window, I watched security escort Max out of the building. His perfect life, built on lies and manipulation, was crumbling. And somewhere, I imagined Dad was watching, knowing his plan had worked perfectly. The truth hadn't just surfaced, it had exploded. The local news couldn't get enough of Max's downfall. Prominent businessman under investigation, the headlines screamed. I clicked off the TV as my doorbell rang. Eva stood there, backpack in hand. Can I stay here? Her eyes were red from crying. Mom's crying all the time, and Dad keeps trying to come to the house. I pulled her into a hug. Of course you can. We settled on the couch with ice cream when Aunt Laura arrived, carrying a box of old photos. Found these at your father's house, she said, pulling out a picture. Look at this one. It showed Max and me as kids, Dad teaching us to fish. Before the expectations, before the lies. He was different then, Eva said, studying the photo. Before he got obsessed with looking perfect. The doorbell rang again. This time it was Reagan, mascara streaked. Sorry to crash your party, she said, attempting a smile. But I couldn't sit alone with those divorce papers anymore. Join us. I patted the couch. We're having a family therapy session with Ben and Jerry's. Did you know, Aunt Laura pulled out another photo, your father almost lost everything once? Before you were born, Max. He made some bad investments, nearly went bankrupt. What happened? Ava asked. He learned the hard way that appearances don't matter as much as integrity. That's why he was so disappointed when Max started. A loud banging interrupted her. Max's voice boomed through the door. I know you're all in there. You can't hide from me. Eva grabbed my arm. Reagan went pale. I'm calling the police, I said, reaching for my phone. No need, a stern voice responded from the hallway. We're already here. 2 officers appeared behind Max, who looked wild-eyed and unshaven. Sir, you need to come with us. We have some questions about certain financial transactions. This is your fault, Max pointed at me. You turned them all against me. You turned Dad against me. No, Max. Aunt Laura stood in the doorway. Your father gave you every chance to come clean. The will condition was his last attempt to save you from yourself. What condition? Reagan asked. If Max was caught in any criminal activity, everything would go to Vivian. Max lunged forward, but the officers caught him. You can't prove anything, he shouted as they led him away. We watched from my window as the police car pulled away. Eva buried her face in Reagan's shoulder. What happens now? She whispered. Now, I said, picking up the old fishing photo. We rebuild, without the lies, without the perfect facade. Together, Reagan added, squeezing Eva's hand. Aunt Laura smiled sadly. It's what your father wanted all along. The truth, no matter how ugly, finally set free. The visiting room at the county jail smelled of disinfectant and despair. Max sat across from me, orange jumpsuit replacing his designer suits, 2 weeks of stubble on his face. You've got some nerve showing up here, he said. Nestor asked me to bring these. I slid papers across the table. The transfer of Dad's estate, you need to sign. His laugh was bitter. So that's it? You win? Get everything you wanted? This isn't about winning, Max. Then what's it about? Revenge? Because I got Dad's approval. You never had his approval. I leaned forward. He knew everything. The embezzlement, the affairs, all of it. This was his way of forcing you to face consequences. He should have just told me. Would you have listened? The silence stretched between us. A guard walked past, keys jingling. Reagan filed for divorce, Max said finally. Full custody of Eva. I know. Daria lost the baby. His voice cracked. Stress, the doctor said. I hadn't known that. Something flickered in my chest. Pity, maybe. The firm's pressing charges, he continued, looking at 5 to 7 years. Everything I built, gone. You built it on lies, Max. He slammed his hand on the table. At least I built something. What do you have? A career? An empty apartment? No family of your own? I have integrity. I stood up. And people who love me for who I am, not what I pretend to be. Vivian, wait. His voice softened. I need your help. If you speak to the board, tell them it was all a misunderstanding. No. I turned back. You don't get to manipulate me anymore. Sign the papers, Max. It's over. Please. He grabbed my arm. I'm your brother. You stopped being my brother the moment you chose lies over family. The guard approached. Everything okay here? I pulled free from Max's grip. We're done. Vivian, Max called after me. You can't leave me here. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry for everything. I paused at the door. Save your apologies for Ava, for Reagan, for all the people you hurt trying to look perfect. Walking out, I heard him shouting, but I didn't look back. My phone buzzed, a message from my company's board. They wanted to meet about a promotion, regional director position. Another text followed from Eva. Movie night still on? Mom's making popcorn. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Dad had been right. The truth really did set you free, just not in the way any of us had expected. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well, living truthfully, while watching karma do its work. I stood in Dad's study, now my study, sorting through the last of his belongings. Eva helped, carefully wrapping his fishing trophies, while Reagan packed books into boxes for donation. Found something, Aunt Laura called from the desk. She held up a leather journal. Your father's private thoughts. My hands trembled as I opened it. The last entry caught my eye. My children chose different paths. Max chased the appearance of perfection, while Vivian sought genuine fulfillment. Today, I made my final decision about the will. Sometimes love means letting people face their own consequences. The doorbell rang. Daria stood there, looking smaller somehow. I'm leaving town, she said. Thought you should know. The police have my full statement about Max's schemes. Are you okay? I asked. She smiled sadly. Getting there, thank you, for helping the truth come out. After she left, I returned to find Eva holding the old fishing photo. Mom, she called to Reagan, can we go fishing sometime, like they used to? Reagan looked up from her packing. I'd like that. Vivian, you'll teach us? Dad would love that, I smiled. My phone buzzed. Nestor. The board meeting's set for tomorrow. You ready to take over as CEO? Actually, I said, watching Eva and Reagan laugh over another old photo, I'm thinking regional director is enough. Some things are more important than climbing higher. Your father would be proud, he said, not of the title, of the choice. After hanging up, I joined Eva and Reagan on the floor, surrounded by memories. Look what else I found. Aunt Laura handed me an envelope. Inside was a photo of me at my first job, beaming with pride. On the back, Dad had written, "My daughter, living her truth." He really did understand, I whispered. We all do now. Reagan squeezed my hand. Family isn't about looking perfect. It's about being real. Eva hugged me suddenly. Thanks for showing us that, Aunt Viv. The afternoon sun streamed through Dad's study windows, catching the dust motes dancing around us as we sorted through the past and planned the future. Not a perfect future. Max's trial was coming up, and healing would take time, but an honest one. Hey, Eva picked up Dad's old fishing rod. Can we try fishing this weekend? Absolutely, I said. But first, ice cream. Some traditions are worth keeping. As we headed out, I glanced back at Dad's journal on the desk. He'd known all along that true happiness doesn't come from appearances or achievements. It comes from being brave enough to live authentically, even when that path seems harder. And sometimes, the family you rebuild is stronger than the one you lost.